Greetings, guys and girls. My name is Dr. John, and today I'm going to explain to you a bit about landscapes in a 3D environment. It has come to my attention that many new artists struggle with landscape creation in their effort to make a landscape look realistic. It is often obvious that it is CG without anyone being able to pinpoint exactly what's wrong with it. So let's take a look. The first thing you need to do to create a landscape is to look at reference images. Through these images, you can get an idea of what your landscape should look like. During this phase of the process, it is important to look at the details and everything that's not quite perfect. Artists tend to make everything in their scenes as perfect as possible, but in reality, the imperfections make your landscape look perfect and realistic. The next question that pops to mind is, how do we create these perfect imperfections? The answer lies in procedural generation. Procedural generation is a process where you use math to generate a random value, which we can use as an input value for our object. One of the best examples of this is noise. Noise is a 1, 2, and 3-dimensional function that generates a random color value between black and white. To achieve this, the noise function uses a complicated formula, but to understand it, I will explain it in another way. First, the noise formula will generate a grid with points on each access point. From these points, lines of varying lengths will originate. These lines will be used as a base for gradients within the grid. Once these gradients are interpolated, you are left with a completely random noise pattern. So, how does this come in handy for creating landscapes? The answer is through displacement. We can apply this noise to a flat plane and use the black and white value to decide which areas need to have a certain height value. In this case, black areas will get an elevation of 100%, whereas white areas will get an elevation of 0%. You can immediately see the result. Once we have applied the noise, we get a landscape kind of object. During this phase, it is important to remember that different noise types also give you different terrain generations. It is important to experiment with different results and options before you settle on something you like. Depending on the amount of detail you want to bring into your scene, you may add different layers of noise in an endeavor to generate more levels of detail. For this, 3 levels of noise is a good compromise between detail and computing power. Once you have settled on a terrain generation, it's time to create some textures and vegetation. For this process, it's again important to work procedurally. When you look at reference images, it becomes clear that there are 2 major things you need to consider. The first thing you need to consider is where the growth in a landscape is. On steep parts, we often see that there's no vegetation at all. Furthermore, depending on the biome, you have a mixture of different species of plants. To simulate this, we need to work with a combination of normal values and noise textures. The normal values will help us generate textures on the correct surfaces based on the angle of the surface, while the noise texture will generate spots of different plant breeds. On top of that, we need the plant growth to look natural. That means that our plants can't be grown in straight lines. We need to make patches of plants all over the landscape. For this, we can use a noise texture to decide where the plants are allowed to grow. Naturally, not all terrains have the same vegetation type, so you need to look back to your reference images to see what feels right. The same system can be used for any kind of object you want to scatter into your scenes, such as houses or rocks, so you can bring it all to life. When all these parts come together, you should have a more realistic looking terrain. The fine-tuning will still need a lot of work, but now you already have a solid base to start with.